email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part two of my conversation with Alisa Cohn, top-ranked executive coach and award-winning author of From Startup to Grown Up. We pick up the discussion with Alisa explaining the best questions you can ask the people around you to better understand your impact as a leader, while remembering that this is intended to elicit feedback, not criticism.
Exactly. It's just observations, right? And so if you think about it, and the way to think about this is a really good question. This is not about feedback. This is not about organizations. This is about just you living in the world. If you have spinach in your teeth, you'd like someone to tell you, right? You would.
Wait, should
so
I look?
That's not
Do
even, right? No, you're fine. You're fine. So there's one thing to say is that if you have spinach in your teeth, you want someone to tell you, but also if you don't know if you have spinach in your teeth, you can be like, do I have spinach in my teeth? Because I'm about to go on stage, right? And so that's not like, oh, it's such a big deal. No, it's just, do I know you're good? Okay, thanks, right? So think about feedback in that context, right? Think of it as just like observations. So first of all, you can always find a coach like myself, and you can have the coach do 360 feedback. And what I do is I go around to all my clients, the executives, around my clients, and I say, what is working? What are Clint's strongest strengths? What does he need to get better at? And what suggestions do you have for Clint to help be a better leader? So that really gives you a snapshot of your impact that you're having. That's number one. But if you don't want to hire a coach or you just want to get it yourself, there's an exercise that I have everybody do that I really encourage you to do, which is to ask people, what are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? And you can ask them by email, you can ask them in person, you can blame it on me. You say, I heard on this podcast, his coach suggesting I do this. I thought it was kind of corny, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you say, what are the 3, when you think about me? I like to say it this way. When you think about me, what are the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me? Now, people will sometimes sugarcoat, but you will get themes. If you think you're strategic and everybody comes back and says you're empathetic and nobody says you're strategic, that's very interesting, right? Like that's like very noticeable. And then the last thing you can do is you can talk to everybody around you, but certainly direct reports, and say, what specific suggestions do you have for me to make me a better leader? And then if they will, it's, oh no, you're so good. No, you're wonderful. You're perfect the way you are. Yeah, right. Okay. You can say, I have the impression from some people that I could give more praise. Right. Just to use your example. Have you experienced that? Do you think that's true? For example, like to kind of prime the pump. Like, no, I think you're going to praise Clint, but I think you're really obnoxious when you call me at 9:00 at night. Stop doing that, or whatever. Right. And so then they can give you suggestions, and that feels less like criticism.
Yeah. I don't need more praise, but I've heard other people say they need more praise, Clint.
Yes. By the way, that is normal too. That's in my book, right? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I think that is also so funny. Like, I don't need that kind of input, but everybody else, right? It's like, okay. The other thing that happens is that people will say, just to share this with your listeners here, people will say, I'm really self-aware. And I'm like, great. Maybe yes, maybe no, right? But then the more people insist to me, they're very self-aware, and they tell me over and over, I know one thing, they are not self-aware. I know that for sure.
They're trying to convince themselves.
I don't know what it is, but people are very funny in what they say. I was once sitting with an executive, I was doing 360 feedback, and I was sitting across from him, and we were talking about the leader, and he was like sort of the skip level boss or whatever, as we say, the big boss. And he was saying about my client, well, I mean, like if, he's this and that, but if I were going to leave, for example, I don't think that they would, tap him to take my place. And, if I were going to like step out of the organization and take another role, I don't think that they would tap him, and it's like, we're trying to get succession planning because, maybe I would leave instead of another role. And after the end of that 30 minutes, I said, well, it sounds like you're taking another role. He goes, who told you that? It was so funny.
You did.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible. People have no idea what comes out of their mouths.
It isn't. I think I speak for most of us when I say I don't really enjoy difficult conversations. So that's probably another weak spot of mine. But there's a cost, obviously, to avoiding them because, as they say, no problem ages well. And you have a something called Coin model, and
Yes.
helps make difficult feedback conversations more productive. What is that?
Well, coin is just a way to make things behavioral. So C is for context, O is for observation, I is for impact, and N is for next step. And so it's context, like in the meeting, in the situation, with your peers, whatever it is, right? My observation is, so with your peers, my observation is that people are feeling right now like you're not bringing them into the dialogue soon enough. The impact is impact. They don't know what's going on and they can't prepare their teams appropriately, and they kind of hear stuff and they feel surprised. So now there's two ways to think about this. What do you think the next step is, Guy? Right? Like, what do you think the next step is? Or I can tell you what the next step is, which I think you need to inform your peers more regularly, right? Because otherwise we're going to have this sort of, circle, this constant circle, and we're never going to get these things done in an aligned way. So that's the coin model. And the reason I try to encourage people to take models like that is because you just need to say it what it is. Otherwise, you're just kind of indicating or hinting. And hinting is not a strategy.
No, it's not.
No. Yeah.
It makes me feel
Why
good.
do you shy? I know. Why do you shy away from difficult conversations?
I mean, I don't necessarily. When I have to have them, I do. It's just they're not fun for me.
Yeah.
You describe it in the book. Actually, I'm more of I like being friendly, and
Yes.
and I'm more of like the buddy. So when I have to step in and be the hard ass, for lack of a better word, it's not my. I do it when I have to, but it's not something I enjoy doing. Now, I'm sure nobody enjoys it, but I certainly don't.
Most people don't enjoy it. That's true. But I think the way I frame that for me as a reframe is a couple of things. So first of all, if you don't catch it while it's small, it's going to get better. So like you just said, no problem, age as well. But the second thing is this: you probably have somebody who could be doing a fantastic job, but they keep getting their own way by virtue of whatever it is they're doing. So it's like the frame is nothing a hard ass. I'm doing you the favor of telling you the truth. I am helping you right now unlock your full potential and genius. So I want to separate that out from the so-called feedback sandwich or whatever they call it. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, oh, Clint, nice shirt. You should really have difficult conversations more often. Keep up the good work.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
exactly.
no, that doesn't work, right? But actually like to praise. When you're investing in your people, which is like, you did a great job on that. Thanks for handling that. Or then also just like being a human being with them, and that, like asking about their weekend and caring about them personally, and like giving them resources that they need, as in like, I know you've never done this before, I'm going to set you up with some training. Also, there's a mentor I want you to meet with because you've never done this before, so I want to help you be successful, like whatever, investing in them. Then you go to them and you say, you have a good relationship, you say, hey, knucklehead, every time this kind of situation happens, you interrupt that person. And I'm telling you what, it's driving them crazy, and they haven't told you, and they should tell you, but they won't. I'm telling you. And the problem is that their whole department doesn't want to work with you anymore because they're perceiving you as a jerk. And here's what I know: you're not a jerk. You're fantastic. And what I need you to do is to think more about the interpersonal skills and the nuances you bring to this room, because you have so much to offer. Right. And that happens to be the truth. I'm not just sugarcoating it and trying to snow you. I actually think that's true. If that's not true, as in you're a loser, then actually the question is, why are we still hanging on to this loser, this organization?
Why are we still paying you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the words I didn't expect to see in the book, and you actually mentioned it earlier, is the word structure. And, you say many entrepreneurs are allergic to structure.
Yeah.
Why do you argue that structure is actually liberating or sexy, as you say, as you put it in the book?
Structure is sexy. Yeah. Because, it's like you're trying to get all these things done. It's very creative. It's very chaotic. And you don't really know if your business is off the rails or on the rails. And so structure helps you get on the rails and know that you're on the rails. And that by itself is liberating, as in you understand where are kind of the sort of the coloring, the lines in the coloring book that you can like live out of and live into. And then structure also has to do with just processes. Like you go into a meeting, no one has an agenda for the meeting. There's no structure to the conversation. You waste your time in meetings. You then have to have another meeting because there's wasted time in the meeting. You've got like 3 or 4 meetings when you should have had one half an hour meeting. Everybody's exhausted by meeting overload. And then they've got to do their actual work in the evenings. That's exhausting. You know what support that? Structure. Let's have a structure for the way we do these meetings, including, so this is what happens when I'm facilitating a meeting very often. I'll come in and I'll say, before planning it together, and I'll say, what's the goal of this meeting? And the number one answer to that question is, well, first we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about this. I'm like, no. What do we want to be different when we walk out of that room an hour from now or a day from now, whatever that is? And that is that people don't think in that way in terms of goals. The second most common answer when I say, what is the goal of this meeting? The second most common answer is, great question. And I'm like, kind of a basic question, honestly, not a great question, but thank you. So it's just like, like to me, structure is like, what are we trying to do here? And asking that question and stepping back, I think that is what is really the gold in structure.
I love structure, and I was surprised to see it in the book though, because I think of founders. The last thing I think of is structure. I think I'm innovative, and I'm outside of the box, and I don't want you to box me in, and I got to be able to agile. And so structure to me sounds like a 4-letter word to them. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, for example, I'm just picturing because Anthropic just filed for their IPO today. They're a startup, right?
Yep.
Without any structure, they're not going to launch anything.
100% agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess I would say that founders can often be like that, or they don't sort of think in structured way or in a structured sort of organizational way. And they sometimes need partners who are very structured to help them be that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that was pretty prevalent in the book, which is a passion point of mine, is culture. And you say culture exists whether leaders intentionally create it or not. So first question is, how do you define culture? Because I've been in organizations where they put it on the wall, but nobody actually believes it and doesn't act in it. And second, what are the signs that culture is being created accidentally?
Yeah. So there's an organization I work with right now. So culture is basically the behaviors, the sum total of the behaviors that people do around you. And there's an organization I work with, and one of their things is, and this is very common actually with plenty of companies, and I've worked in many companies like this, what they have on their walls are daring mindset, for example, but how they act is tentative. And let's say they have on their walls constructive conflict, right? Or speaking truth to power, whatever that is, but how they are is nice. So just to say the whole notion of culture, so people think that culture is, we like each other. We have picnics every year. That's not culture, right? Culture is sort of how do we need to operate together that's actually going to help us, win the day. So back in the days of Facebook, move fast and break things, that was never going to work at a biotech firm, right? Because move fast and breaking things is not acceptable at a biotech firm. So you have to kind of think about, what do we need here? And how do we expect to operate together in order to get what we need? One of the companies I worked with, he would hire people who were the smartest, but he didn't hire people who were collaborative. So he said, we have a collaborative culture, but he didn't hire collaborative people. He hired Stanford PhDs who are kind of solo operators and very smart. And so what he told me was, I have the fastest rowing crew in the world, but the boat's going round and round in circles because everybody is rowing in their own direction. And so culture is about what knits things together. And it's what you actually do, not what you say you do.
One of the things that is also very prevalent, obviously, in the last few years is because of the pandemic. You talk about it in the book as well, but, there was already going remote culture, but then that just pushed it 100 miles an hour, right? So one of the challenges that I've always worried about people who got hired during the pandemic, to me, culture is, you kind of observe it when you're in the office and you hear your boss's boss on the phone.
Yeah.
And then they hang up. What do they say after the phone is hung up? Do they cuss that idiot out? But so that's how you kind of get an idea for culture. But if it's fully remote work, that makes understanding the culture more difficult, doesn't it?
I think it makes everything more difficult. So what you just said is so true. We do pick up things on Zoom or in interaction. So for example, is our culture that if I Slack you or text you, you're going to get back to me immediately? Or is our culture you're going to get back to me in a few days? Like, what's acceptable in terms of response?
Right.
Is our culture that we fly out for business trips the night before, or cultures we fly in that same day, right? These are some of the questions that just is supposed behavior. I think even more fundamentally, when you're not side by side people in the workplace, you miss out on all of that mentoring. So
Yeah.
what if you're on the phone and you're talking to someone, and then your boss overhears you? And if it's a good boss, they would say, so an example would be, seems like you were having trouble getting that information from that person. You might want to next time try something different. Or sounded to me like you weren't talking to the right person. So you were getting frustrated because maybe you weren't talking to the decision maker. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Makes complete sense. That happens all the time. Let's talk about how you can make sure you're talking to the right person or handle it when you're not talking to a decision maker. That's like real-time mentoring. And that is, priceless. And a lot of companies are going back into the office for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, we do project work and it's really difficult to do that remote. It's much better face to face, even though we have to fly people from around the world in one room for a week. The value that comes out of that isn't just the plan, it's the relationships where now you've converted somebody from an email address into somebody you actually have a connection with that you made that week.
Totally.
Yeah. And then
you can live off that for so long.
You can run a project for 3 years as long as they have that first week together, 100%.
It's so true. It's so true. That's good that you guys figured that out.
Another thing you wrote was, speaking of this hybrid remote work, you asked the question early in one of your chapters, you said, are your systems optimized for this environment? You actually used the example, which of course resonated with me, about an angry email exchange that took place between two people, but they kept hitting reply all. So everybody's on the sideline eating popcorn, right? And I had that happen in my own organization. Those emails kept flying back and forth between these two people. And I finally sent them back an email, said, stop, get on the phone and talk this out. You'll have the answer in 5 minutes, as opposed to all these emails going back and forth. You're getting more angry. You don't understand. And one of the things I've observed is it's always been the case, but certainly as we moved hybrid or remote, it became more exacerbated, was people don't want to have a conversation. They just want to send a Slack message or a Jira message or a text message saying it's done or whatever. And you need to have the conversations because that's where you can ask the clarifying questions to make sure you're not getting off course.
Also, that's where people just usually have better communication skills. They just do. I just literally had a coaching call with one of the CEOs I work with, and she was dealing with this. It's a whole thing, like there's a meeting coming up and it wasn't gelling. And then she was getting a lot of problems for having problems with an external stakeholder. And so they were going back and forth like on text or whatever. And then they finally just picked up the phone and they had a tough tone, but they were able to convert that tough tone into a more collaborative discussion. And when you're on email or text or whatever, you're getting more heated and you're not being careful about how you're coming across on email. People are not taught, and there's so many things, right? If people aren't taught communication skills in general, but at least as humans, we have something to model. And people are definitely not taught email skills. And then they might think, oh, that doesn't matter. Well, that's exactly how everybody sees you in writing, in email and Slack and text and whatnot. So if you don't, I would say on the positive side, if you build outstanding communication skills by email, Slack, and text, you will definitely have a leg up.
Yeah. I think you talk about digital body language. And that's kind of what this is.
Yes, 100%.
So how, as a leader, how do I build trust among people that I don't really see in real life? I just see them on screen, and half the time their camera's off and they're on mute and they're talking, and we're 10 years into this thing, I feel like, and you're still telling people, hey, you're on mute.
I know, it's so funny how 2020, it's like you're on mute. Well, I think it's really like, the question is, what are you trying to do? So if you have your executive team together and half people are off camera, and you want them to be on camera, I think what you need to do is separately say, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to build the culture when our leadership team that we're all kind of present as much as possible. If we were in the office, we'd see each other. So I want to do that, remotely. So unless there's some reason not to have your camera on, could you put your cameras on? Right. And then when you say people, I don't even people are talking, I don't even know what. I think you need to sort of set some standards for how do we interrelate around here. That's about just what do you expect around meetings and the way you guys interact and all those things. But the second thing is also, how do you build trust? You build trust in the same way. You build trust with small talk. How was your weekend? I care about your kid's soccer game. Joking around builds trust. You said earlier, and it's so true, finding some time, spend some time in person now and again builds trust. But it also builds trust. Do what you say you will do. Showcase that you're on their side. Try to get resources for people. Do them a favor. All those things build trust.
And it's funny, I think I just came off of a 3.5-year innovation project at Coca-Cola, and we had a marketing lead and a technical lead. And the marketing lead, as you might imagine, there's a little bit of stereotype here, but it's true. The marketing lead was always, I loved her because she would get the people talking, what'd you do this weekend? But if you weren't careful, your 45-minute meeting became 5 minutes long because of the 40 minutes up front. But when she left, it just didn't feel the same because you weren't getting that connection. It wasn't as great.
Right. That's the way it is, 100%.
Now, you're right that leaders need a daily meeting with themselves. And why is that the most important meeting on the calendar?
Well, that gives them time to have the space that we talked about in terms of reflection and strategic planning and kind of vision and, giving themselves time and space to think where they're not in meetings.
And again, you got to carve out that time to do it. And it's hard, but
you have to make the commitment to carve out the time. That's the way it is. Yeah.
So when you look at the leaders who successfully make the journey from startup to grown up, what's the one habit or mindset shift that consistently separates those who scale from those who stall?
Reflection and learning agility. Awesome. Learning acceleration. The ability to learn over and over again rapidly and deploy what they've learned into their context.
Well, Alisa, this has really been great. I appreciate your time today. If people want to learn more about you or engage your services, how can they do that?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn. My name is Alisa Cohn, ALISACOHN. You can definitely get my book, From Startup to Grown Up, my podcast. It's free, From Startup to Grown Up. Yep, thank you. And follow me on Instagram, where I do little mini leadership videos as well.
And hopefully you'll learn as much or more than I did, because I learned a lot. So thanks so much for the conversation.
That's so great. Thank you, Clint. It was great.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.